Okay, look ahead is a distraction. Now, what I mean by that is not that you shouldn't do look ahead when you're cubing. In fact, look ahead is going to be the most important thing when you get to a higher level of cubing. But when you're more starting out, look ahead is just a distraction that's going to make you worse if you try and pursue it too much. So some of you have asked me before, because when I first started my channel, I was just doing 3x3, and then I started working on other events like 4x4 up to 7x7, and especially on 5x5, people have asked me how I improved so quickly, and how it's done is basically this. There are 3 things you have to focus on in cubing. There's more, but like main 3 things. Number 1 is you have to know how to solve a case. Number 2 is you have to know how to turn fast. And number 3 is you have to do look ahead, and it goes in that order. So when I approach a new puzzle like 5x5, in the beginning, I couldn't turn very fast. And I also, when I saw a case, like if I saw this case for centers and I didn't know what to do, well, now I know what to do, and it just feels like an algorithm to me. So that is the stuff I was working on in the very beginning, and I had no attention put into look ahead. So when I was averaging over 2 minutes to the point where I was averaging sub 130, I absolutely did not care about look ahead. So one way you can tell that you don't need look ahead yet is when you're solving, if it still feels tiring to solve. Not for your hands, but for your brain. If it feels like you are applying mental energy into the solve, it is not time for look ahead yet. This is because most likely, if you still are thinking a lot, you're thinking about how to solve cases. And if you're thinking about that, you actually, like if you're trying to do something fast, you actually can't think about 2 things at once. You can, but it's going to make you slow. So therefore, if you're fast, you have to focus on only one thing, and that's either going to be how you solve your cases, which is number 1, and then turning fast, that's not about thinking, and number 3 is look ahead. So don't do look ahead unless you actually know how to solve all the cases and can do them quickly. Now, some of you might say that I, in the past, made a tutorial that was more aimed at beginners who just learned how to solve the cube, and in that tutorial, I gave look ahead as one of the tips. And remember, I'm not saying that if you're slower, you shouldn't do look ahead. What I'm saying is if you have not built up the skill of turn speed and recognizing how to do cases, then you shouldn't do look ahead. As a beginner, there's only one algorithm you need in the second layer, and that makes it so that look ahead is really easy, because once you do a few days or weeks of solves, that algorithm is completely ingrained in your muscle memory. So if you don't plan on learning F2L, if you're just sticking with the beginner method, look ahead is really easy. You find one piece at a time and you do one algorithm only. But when you're doing F2L, there's over 40 different cases, and while we say that's intuitive, eventually it's not going to be intuitive anymore, because you start by learning why they work so that you can not memorize a bunch of stuff. After you do that for a long time, every case just looks like, hey, that's a case I know. So when I see this one and this one, how I taught this in the advanced F2L tutorial is you compare them and their colors don't match here, like the green and the reds don't touch each other. So that's how you know that you have to take it out a very specific way to cause them to pair up, and then you can insert them intuitively. Now, once you've done this case for a while, based on the edge location and the corner orientation, it's just a case you know, and that's eventually what it's going to be. And once you can do that and you don't have to think about the cases anymore, the next step is obviously being able to train your eyes to look away from the thing you're solving, which is pretty difficult at first because it's not something you'd be used to, but then that's how you eventually work your way up to look ahead. It's not something you do in the beginning. If you try to do look ahead from the start, as you're still intuitively trying to figure out how to do cases, then you're holding 2 things in your brain at once, and that's how to solve it and what's coming up next. And I feel that this is especially important for older solvers, because I find that when you're younger, just turning fast is cool enough, and that is something that you really end up developing. And so especially younger cubers in the beginning will just not even think much about look ahead. But I do know that older cubers, when you get smarter, you try to be able to prioritize everything for 2 reasons. One is because you have less time, and the other reason is just because, like, logically, you want to make sure you're doing all the right things in order to be fast. Or this applies to other things besides cubing. It's not just being fast, it's about being good at anything. Now, that's often a good approach, but it's not always the best approach, because when you try and become good at something, then you're looking at people who are very good. And when they say that look ahead is the most important thing, it's because it's the most important thing for them. Once you're really good, it is the most important thing, because they all know how to recognize cases, they all know how to do the best solution for those cases, and they can turn extremely fast. So you can't really improve those, like those kind of just hit the top. But for look ahead, at least in cubing, people just are unable to be perfect. And so obviously a pro that has perfected a wide variety of different things in cubing, but has not perfected look ahead, and every other pro hasn't perfected look ahead either, then they'll all say that's the most important thing. But that doesn't mean that's the most important thing you should focus on in the beginning, because look ahead out of all these things actually gets you the least amount of return. Because when you're first starting out, the reason you're pausing is not because of look ahead, it's because you can't recognize cases. And the reason your solves aren't that fast is because you're not turning very fast yet. So those are all things you have to work on before you can even get to look ahead. This is a really important approach for improving in anything, and it's not exactly turn speed and look ahead obviously in other areas of life, but I'll look at two things, and that is a more mental sport, which is chess, and a more physical sport, which is tennis. And chess has been around for centuries, and so they must have figured out something about how people should learn. So in chess, the approach that people take to learning is very similar to the approach we take in cubing, or at least the ideal approach you should take, which is you should try to drill all the fundamentals into your head until they become so natural that you don't have to think about it. That's the important part, not having to think about it. And then you can start focusing on other things, which is look ahead, which in chess would be being able to analyze positions further into the future. What I mean by fundamentals is like moving your pieces to the center of the board and getting all your pieces out instead of having them at the back rank. So similar to cubing, you could try to do look ahead from the start. You could try to be like the pros in chess and try to analyze 10 moves in advance, but that is just not going to work. It's a fun puzzle you'll do once in a while because obviously anything like that will make you better at chess, but it's not the most important thing. And then next is a more physical sport like tennis. In tennis, it actually takes years to be able to develop your ability to just like hit a forehand and hit a backhand and hit a serve effectively at all. Those take a very long time to develop, and for most of your first few years of playing, that's most of what you'll be doing. Oh, and also footwork, very important. Here's the thing, if you take someone who has played tennis for a year or two and they're playing a match now and they're just trying to hit their shots, they're not really thinking about where they're hitting it or how they're going to beat their opponent, they're just trying to hit good shots. If you start telling them to apply a very specific tactic of 3 shots in a row because their opponent is very bad at dealing with that, the person you have now told this to may lose because you told them to do that. And the reason is because even though you told them good advice with good intentions, that is what pros do, or just good players do. That's not what someone starting out does. Because when you are still thinking about how you're going to make contact with the racket and the ball, that is not the right time to be thinking about where you are trying to hit as part of a tactic in a long sequence of shots. Tactics are important in tennis, they're very important, but they are not something you focus on until your technical ability is at least at a certain level where you don't have to think about what you're doing anymore. And so if your brain's just empty, that's when you can start shoving tactics into your brain, but not at a time when your brain is still focusing on how you're going to hit your shots. And so this brings us to the next point, which is going to be important to cubing again, but hopefully this has all been important to your whole life because this is just how you improve at stuff in general. So when you learn the beginner method, you don't have anything to compare that to. So to you, that's fast, I guess, because that is all you know. But when you learn, say, F2L or a different way of doing the last layer, like instead of doing the corner twisty thing, you do OLL and PLL, then that will slow you down at first, and that is okay. And in the beginning, for everyone, that feels okay too, because it's like, okay, I understand how big of an improvement this is, and I know that in like a week or so of constantly doing this every single solve, it is going to make me better. Although that is not the natural thought anymore once you get a lot faster. Say you're sub 20 or sub 15, and you're applying a new way of solving some F2L pair. Now, that is going to slow you down for longer, and you're not going to be able to practice it constantly because the same case doesn't always show up every solve. And that is because, remember the 3 steps of recognition or knowing the case and turn speed and look ahead. When you are quite fast, you are doing look ahead, but you can't do it without the other 2 first. And when you are learning a new case, you are essentially still trying to apply a look ahead, but you don't know these 2. You can't turn fast for it, and you can't recognize it that quickly, like what you're supposed to do yet. So that's why it makes you slower, because you don't have the main 2 components. And if you try to work on the main 2 components, that makes you stop doing look ahead for the solve, which makes your solve slower. So even if you can do that case faster, it makes your solve slower because you can't do look ahead yet for it. So that's the main dilemma you run into, especially because the time it takes to get good at a new case you're trying to work on is going to be significantly harder if it's a very rare thing that shows up. You have to realize that it is the same multi-step plan to being good at it as before. You can't try to look ahead until you have turn speed and recognition, and you have to make sure that you take that step by step. Don't try to think that, oh, if I see it 5 times in a solve and try to do the new thing, I'll be good at it. No, it takes a lot more repetition than that. And so that's why when I was learning new events like 5x5, I was just trying to do solves over and over and over and over as much as I could every day. And then I wasn't doing look ahead at all because I was really trying to make sure that I got all the cases seen. And it's hard to see all the cases because there's way more cases that show up less often, because a 5x5 solve takes a minute. And during that time, I could scramble and solve 3x3 like 3 times. So that's why for 5x5, I was just making sure I was doing a ton of solves. And in general, just for anything you learn, repetition is key in the beginning before you start thinking about, okay, now that I am sub X, I'm like some decent level, and I feel like the things that I'm doing are quite natural to me now. Now, what is my game plan for moving forward? That's when you have to start changing it up. But if you are still like sub 40 or sub 30 in 3x3, I do not recommend going for look ahead. It is just a distraction.